Greetings, ladies and gentlefish. It has come to that time in videos where we're going to take a look at another of the classes within World of Tanks and kind of give a general rundown of the class, and this time it is the turn of the Tank Destroyer to receive some attention. Now, before going too much further, I should say I am going to subdivide Tank Destroyers into three categories. This is of course making a series of generalizations. You will find machines that don't neatly fit into one category or the other, so you do have to use a bit of your common sense when you're kind of trying to work out how you're going to play your own particular machine. But nonetheless, hopefully this guide should give people an introduction to Tank Destroyers, an idea of what they are good at, what they are not good at, good practice in a TD, bad practice in a TD, and so on and so forth. If you're already a very experienced player and you know how to play TDs, you're unlikely to get that much from this video, but whether you want to still watch it or not is entirely up to you. There might be some tidbits in there that you don't know. So, having said that, let's get on with the show. So, Tank Destroyers in general. Within the game, a Tank Destroyer basically gets a cruddy hull, mounts a big gun, and is your ranged fire support, your primary direct fire ranged fire support. Now, this kind of brings in several implications about what they're going to be good at and what they're not going to be good at. They're going to be good when they can keep their opponents at range. An ideal Tank Destroyer is one that sits in the second line while there is someone up front doing the spotting for them and just lobs large caliber shells at the enemy until they die. That is your kind of stereotypical Tank Destroyer gameplay. Now, that does not mean sitting at the back of the base and camping the red line. The problem with doing that is you often find that the first opportunity you get to shoot someone is when half your team are already dead, and that's suboptimal. So you want to make sure you get yourself into a position from which you can actually support your team as they advance, rather than just sitting at the back waiting to get wrecked. Now, it's worth noting, Tank Destroyers within this game used to be more powerful. They used to get a class ability that meant that their camo rating was better after firing. They didn't lose, because usually when you pull the trigger on a tank, you lose a good chunk of your camo rating because you just fired the damn gun. And Tank Destroyers lost less of that camo when they fired the gun. Wargaming removed that, however, because Wargaming don't like nerfing premium tanks. If it's a premium Tank Destroyer that was released before that patch, things like the E25 for example, you still retain that camo bonus. Also, the maps have changed over time, becoming less favourable to long-range combat and encouraging more close-range brawls. So, the heyday of the Tank Destroyer, I think it is fair to say, is over, unless it has a resurgence sometime later. And Tank Destroyers are a little bit, in many cases, obsolete, but you can still do well in them. It's also worth, with a Tank Destroyer, having a good knowledge of the camouflage and spotting mechanics in this game. I'm not going to go into them in this video, but it's definitely worthwhile going and checking them out. So, the three categories of TD that I'm going to split them down into are traditional Tank Destroyers, assault guns, and turreted Tank Destroyers. The first two are subcategories of fixed casemate Tank Destroyers, and the second is not. So, let's start off with your traditional Tank Destroyer. Now, as I mentioned, these are a subcategory of fixed casemate Tank Destroyers. What does fixed casemate mean? It means that you have a superstructure on the top of some chassis that mounts a gun, but that the tank does not have a turret. So your gun has some limited traverse at the front of it, and then you have to completely move your tank in order to reacquire a target. And one question you might ask is, well, why on earth would someone design a tank that didn't have a turret? Because that's a big vulnerability. If someone gets to your side, you physically cannot defend yourself. That's very true. And I'm going to, in the two fixed casemate examples, we'll talk about why that is the case. So, with your traditional Tank Destroyer, something like the Nashorn, what you have is a chassis on which is some sort of superstructure with a gun shoved in it, usually a very powerful gun. Well, it has to be a very powerful gun to offset the fact that you don't have a fully rotating turret. From a historical perspective, of course, often these machines were either used for anti-aircraft defence, and so there we're talking some of the tanks in the flimsy German tank destroyer line, you know, the PZSFL-4C, for example. And sometimes they were a way of taking an obsolete chassis and making it relevant again. So in the case of, for example, the Su-85, the Soviets captured a series of Panzer III tanks from the Germans. The Panzer III tank, the largest caliber gun it could mount was a 5cm gun, which during the mid and later stages of the war was kind of puny. And so what the Soviets did with these captured tanks, rather than just scrapping them, they made use of them. They removed the turret. The turret ring wasn't large enough to accommodate a turret that could accommodate a gun more than 5cm in caliber, and so they removed the turret, they put a superstructure on it, and they shoved an 85mm gun out of the front, and that's what you get with the Su-85I. If you look at machines like the Jagdpanther, it's based on the Panther chassis. The Panther mounted a 75mm gun. The Jagdpanther took the Panther, removed the turret, put a superstructure on top, and shoved an 88mm gun in the front of it. You know, and so often these machines were not originally conceived as to have that particular role. They were just a way of upgunning an existing chassis. So it was an economical way of getting a relatively large gun onto the battlefield. Sometimes that was just to use up spare chassis, as in the case of the Su-85I. Sometimes it was a way of bridging some perceived armament gap. So, for example, going back to the Soviets, when they decided that they needed an 85mm gun capable of knocking out a Tiger, because Tigers were being problematic, they decided to modify the T-34 medium tank. But it would take time to do that, so in the interim, they took a T-34, knocked the turret off, because they'd have to, in order to put a turret on that was big enough to accommodate the gun, they'd have to change the turret ring, etc, etc. So they just knocked the turret off and shoved an 85mm gun out the front, and thus you got the Su-85. A similar story for the Su-100. They wanted a 100mm gun capable of challenging the Tiger II. And so, until they had a vehicle capable of doing that, they took a T-34, knocked the turret off, shoved a 100mm gun out the front of it, and voila, you have a way of getting a 100mm gun onto the battlefield to contest a Tiger II. They're not ideal machines, but they are ways of getting a big gun where it's needed. And this is kind of reflected in World of Tanks. So let's take the Nashorn as a fairly extreme example. The Nashorn had 600 health, which is lower than either a medium tank or a heavy tank of the same class. This is a tier 6 machine, of course. Tier 6 medium tanks tend to have around 750 health. Tier 6 heavy tanks tend to have around 800 plus health, 800-900, sometimes up to just shy of 1,000 health. But it's more than a same tier a light tank or artillery piece as a general rule. So yeah, that's where your health falls in. In terms of armour, it's pretty terrible. You've got 30mm of armour at the front, 20 at the sides, 20 at the rear. There are tier 2s with more armour than this thing. It's very, very, very flimsy. But you get a very punchy 88mm gun poking out of the front of the tank. And so with this sort of machine, you want to provide supporting fire for your team. But don't be afraid when you get towards the end of the game and it looks like it's clean-up time. Don't be afraid to press down the W key and go and support your team as they go on the offensive and take out the bad guys. You shouldn't be glued to one spot. You should be looking at different ways to use your tank to be continually providing support for your team. If you're not providing support for your team, you're not doing anything, and your team is effectively that one tank down. Of course, there'll be some occasions when the best thing to do is just to sit tight, rather than being aggressive, but that's always the case, and you just have to play it by ear. Important skills for a crew on this kind of tank destroyer, well, your primary defense is not being spotted, and so things like Sixth Sense and camouflage become your friend. They're really skills that you want to prioritize. In terms of equipment, generally speaking, sometimes these sort of tank destroyers are open-topped, sometimes they're not, but again, you want to prioritize not being seen, and you want to make your gun as punchy as you possibly can. So it's quite common, for example, to take a camouflage net, to take a gun rammer to make your gun fire a bit faster, and to take some binocular telescopes In an ideal world, someone else will be the one doing the spotting, but this is the game, this is not an ideal world, and your teammates are not to be relied upon, so ever so occasionally you may have to do your own spotting. Generally speaking, fixed casemate tank destroyers have pretty shoddy view range, so coated optics isn't going to add much, but binocular telescopes can give you the view range that you need to carry a game from time to time. In some examples you can mount vents, so for example with the Stug 4 here, you can take vents, I believe, yep, there we go, vents, but in the case of the Nashorn and a number of other machines it's open topped, so vents it cannot take. Some people will take vents, some people will prefer to stick with binos and camo net. It's kind of up to you what you want to choose. In terms of consumables, there's nothing really special here. I've got your standard 3 consumables. You could try swapping some of these out. I think a small repair kit is a priority because sometimes you'll get tracked and you really want to repair that track and be somewhere else. But it's kind of up to you. Just quickly going back to crew skills actually. In the case of some of these fixed casemate tank destroyers that are a bit tougher, so let's say for example the Object 704, you might decide that repairs is something you want to prioritise over camouflage. You tend to find that at the higher tiers your tank destroyers get more health and so can take an extra hit or two, and so repairs becomes more of a priority compared with camouflage. But in the case of something like the Nashorn, it's very fragile and camouflage should definitely be your priority, or the Dicamax is another example of that. So I guess let's go and show you some gameplay in a traditional fixed casemate tank destroyer. So here we are, our fixed casemate traditional tank destroyer game. I was going to show you an ISU game with this. I will be honest, it was actually on this map as well, but there were problems with that. So I'm actually going with this Stug 4 game. Now, bear in mind throughout the course of this game, the gun on the Stug 4 is not very good, so don't judge the gun performance too much here. But still, the sort of gameplay should give you some ideas of the sort of thing to be looking for with fixed casemate tank destroyers. So, we're actually top tier here. The Stug actually gets limited matchmaking, so it only sees tier 6 games at worst as a way to try and compensate you for that terrible, terrible gun. And you'll see the terrible, terrible gun in action later on, or in a bit. And this is an encounter game here on Erlenberg. Now, we are initially coming over here to the right hand side. Again, you can see we're not just sitting in our spawn point. So we're trying to keep our opponents at arm's length, but without base camping. That is the idea. So that our gun is going to be useful straight from the off, from the beginning of the game. As if we're right at the back, it's not useful at all. Now we've got that Panzer IV up ahead who is doing some spotting. The bushes here are opaque, which means we're more than 15 meters away from them, or which means that when we fire the gun, we're not going to remove the camo rating provided by those bushes. If we were to move forward to the point where the bushes were transparent, sure, we'd be able to see the bad guys, but we would also mess around with our own camo rating. And as in the camo rating of the bushes would be removed every time we pulled the trigger, and that would be suboptimal. So just waiting to find a target. There's the T1 Heavy. Now if we had a gun worth a damn, we would be penetrating this guy, but alas we don't. There we go, we start getting some penetrations now. I appreciate that I've switched out to APCR ammo here, but as I say, don't judge the sort of gun performance you get on a fixed casemate tank destroyer by what you see here. So we put a couple of shots into that T1, and we're now relocating. The front of a T1 isn't the best engagement for the Stug anyway, and so we're going to see if we can pick up shots on other people. There's an Excelsior over there. We might be able to put shots into his... oh no, he's straightened his side outside of the turret. If he angles the tank, there we go, put a shot into his side. And there's another one, straight into the track, hopefully tracking him. And I believe we fire a few blind shots in his general vicinity. Now you don't want to necessarily do too many blind shots if your TD has a large gun with a long reload. But if it's got a fairly fast firing gun, you can try a few blind shots here or there. Just be careful about your ammo count. Some machines like the E25 have a pretty limited ammo supply. and it's very easy to burn through the ammunition if you're not careful. So again, just looking out for targets. M3 Lee here. Oh, we just missed there. But you can see here, we are definitely second line, but again, we weren't just camping at the base. If the M3 Lee pokes out a little bit more, we can pick him up. Cruiser 4, there we go. There's our first kill. Churchill Mark 3. Put a shot into him. Switch to the M3 Lee, as if we can pick up a kill we probably want to, and we bounce on a Lee. Someone else gets the kill. Switching back to the Churchill here, trying to get some fire on him, but although the turret of the Churchill is quite weak, like I said, this gun isn't the best, and he is 400 meters away. So it's not a trivial penetration. In fact, it's not trivial to even hit the guy, let alone penetrate. And that's the problem we're having a lot of the time. Our shots aren't always even hitting. There we go, finally get a shot into the side of his turret. And now he's given us his side, we can shoot him quite happily, but he was giving his side so that he could get the hell out of dodge, which is fair enough. Now I don't have Sixth Sense on the crew here, so I don't know when I've been spotted. Well, the first I'll know that I've been spotted is, you know, finding out with my face. So that's something we have to be a little wary of. T-25 to our left has pretty shoddy armour. No, no dice. Fair enough. We take a blind shot anyway, just on the off chance. M3 Lee, nope. Churchill, nope. This is one problem you find with you can find with your tank destroyers, that your fields of fire end up being blocked, which can be a little frustrating. So if your fields... Ooh, there's kill number 2. If you find your fields of fire are blocked to an unacceptable degree, rather than just sitting there waiting for people to drive in front of your gun, go somewhere else. Go somewhere where you do have shots. A20 here. There we go. We pick up the kill on him for kill number 3. Our team of currently capping this. I mean, this is an encounter game, so it takes some effort to capture the base. And there's just the 5 of them left. We've got this Churchill 3, T-25, T-34, Su-85 and an Su-85B. Now, you could argue that perhaps I should be going hunting now, but I was a little concerned about the T-25 and the T-34 putting shots into me if I did. There's the Su-85, now we miss him. T-25 is down, and really I should probably be going hunting right about now. I could be taking down this Su-85 to keep our artillery alive, for example. But as it is, I decide to stay here. I thought I would have more shots on this fellow than I do, if I'm honest. And Su-85B. There we go. We pick up kill number 4 on him. And now I decide to go for it. There's just a T-34 and the Churchill Mark III left, as the Su-85 got taken down by our artillery. And there's a very good chance I won't get there in time. I've probably left my clean up a little bit too late. But, you know, them's the breaks. That's not the main point of this replay. The main point with this replay was to show you that you don't want to be too aggressive in your fixed casemate tank destroyers, but you don't want to camp at the red line either. So always try and make sure you're in a position to give supporting fire to your allies. Let's go and have a quick look at the results for this one. So it was enough for second class mastery, fighter, fire for effect, and Baruza. Finished third on our team. Second, if you order it by damage, we did 1,268 damage, got 4 kills and 612 base experience. Yeah, and we were running a premium account at the time, so we actually made basically an 18,000 credit profit and got sort of 1,300 experience out of it because it's a premium vehicle and it got an XP buff. So hopefully that gave you an idea of the sort of gameplay you can expect from fixed casemate tank destroyers. The second category of tank destroyer I wanted to talk about are the assault guns. Now, the machines I'm generally referring to here are slow, ponderous, and very heavily armoured. So for example here we've got the T-28 heavy tank concept. Generally speaking, these machines are found in either the British or the American tech trees. There are some examples from other nations. For instance, the Jagdtiger and Jagdtiger 88 also mount pretty formidable frontal armor, and you can use these as assault guns in the right situation as well. In the case of these machines, you are sacrificing your sneaky camo rating that you get in many other tank destroyers for that armor, and you are sacrificing mobility for the armor. And these machines tend to be a little bit at the mercy of the matchmaker. If you are top tier, you really want to be getting stuck in, being a little careful. I mean, you have armor, so you can use yourself a bit as a makeshift heavy tank, bounce some shots, but you do need to be aware that you do not have the hit point pool of a same tier heavy tank. For example, the T28 heavy tank concept here has 880 hit points at tier 7. Most same tier heavy tanks have around the 1200-1300 hit point mark. 880 is rather low, but you can still bounce shots. The other thing to bear in mind is with these assault guns, often they tend to have quite large weak spots. So in the case of the T28 HTC, you have these machine gun ports on each side of the tank that have massive shoot me signs over them, and they're quite weakly armoured. So if you do decide to get close to your enemy, you do have to be a little bit careful. Be aware of where your weak spots are and do what you can to try and not give the enemy easy shots at them. Historically, these machines, generally speaking, are the ones that were designed to assault the Siegfried Line in the Second World War. The Germans also have some of these machines. In the case of the German machines, things like the Jagdtiger and the Ferdinand, these were ways of using up either obsolete chassis or upgunning an existing chassis. So in the case of the Ferdinand, it's based off the Porsche Tiger design. The Henschel Tiger design was eventually chosen, so there were a bunch of spare Porsche chassis lying around, and so they took the turret off, put a superstructure on top, and put an 88mm gun poking out the front of them. In the case of the Jagdtiger, the original idea was to take the Tiger II tank, knock the turret off, and put a 128mm anti-tank gun into it. I've got a Jagdtiger 88 here. The only reason that this has an 88mm gun is because there were not enough 128mm guns, and so some of the early Jagdtigers had an 88 poking out of the front instead. But my point is, with your fixed casemate tank destroyers, you've got the armor, and if you've got the armor, generally speaking, you want to be using it if you can. To bounce shots and take shots that, if they went at more vulnerable members of your team, might be damaging. Caveats, of course: if you've got big weak spots, you want to make sure you can hide them. Secondly, your hull traverse tends to be terrible, and so circling these things to death tends to be quite easy. Try not to get yourself at close range with a light or a medium tank, or even some heavy tanks. Generally speaking, although you want people to be shooting you, if you can keep yourselves at mid-range, that will encourage people to shoot at you and probably bounce. That means that your gun can fire back at them, but it means that you can't be easily flanked. For that reason, you also generally want to stick around with your allies, so that you can't be taken out too easily. These are not the sort of tank to be sitting toward the back of the map and providing supporting fire with. They are so slow and so ponderous. You want to spend as little time stationary as possible. You want to, where it's reasonable to do so, keep pushing the tempo and keep advancing so that you remain in the fight, rather than the game just leaving you behind. Now, of course, if you're bottom tier with these machines, as with any heavily armoured tank, your armour is suddenly worth a lot less, and you need to be much more cautious about the targets you engage and about the ranges you do that at. And so then you might want to be a little bit more passive in the machine. Generally speaking, in terms of crew skills, Sixth Sense is always a good idea, and you want to prioritise repairs in these tanks over camouflage. Again, there's nothing in particular to note about consumables. And in terms of equipment, often these machines will be fully enclosed, so you can use vents. You're not going to be sitting at the back, and so things like binocular telescopes and camouflage net aren't as useful because you're generally going to be on the move. So a gun rammer to increase your reload speed is always a good idea. Vents generally improves the tank. You can see here I've got a heavy spall liner. Sometimes you might find that's a good idea, as tank destroyers in general are priority artillery targets, and whereas your more lightly armoured traditional TD might just get one shot by an artillery piece, you might actually be able to take the artillery shot, and a spore liner might mitigate some of that damage. I wouldn't recommend a spore liner on that many tanks, but you might want to consider it on your heavily armoured tank destroyers, your assault guns. Other pieces of equipment that you might want to think about. Toolbox is not a terrible idea to try and put your tracks on faster to decrease the chances that you're going to just be circled to death or flanked. An enhanced gun lane drive is possible depending on the aim time of the gun that you've got. Coated optics is another option. You're going to be constantly on the move, and so if you've got coated optics you have that view range bonus permanently, whereas binocular telescopes would not give you that. So there's a few things to bear in mind with your assault gun tank destroyers, and again let's go and have a look at a quick bit of gameplay. So here we go with our assault tank destroyer gameplay. I'm actually in a 3-man TD platoon here. I say 3-man, 3-person TD platoon. I'm platooned up with Fiora in her SU-2244 and Gaming Bear in his SU-100M1, and I'm in the T-28 heavy tank concept. Now, I don't think we're going to see that much of Gaming Bear or Fiora this game, because we're in quite different machines. And this here is Himmelsdorf, which is, of course, a map that favours the more heavily armoured machine. Or maybe we will see some of somebody. I can't quite remember. Anyway, because I'm in quite a heavily armoured machine, I've decided to take it up on top of the hill and duke it out up here with all of the bad guys. And Fiora's actually coming up here as well in her SU. SU's a bit of the kind of hybrid machine. I wouldn't neatly put it into one of the categories of TD I've already highlighted. It's one of those slight oddities. Depends on the matchmaker how you end up using it. So, coming up here, and there's a bounce. We don't quite have the gun depression to come up over that rise and shoot people, but here we go. Right, coming up, and we're just moving forward to this little pile of rubble here, and trying to use it to angle my armour around. Now I do have those 2 weak spots, one on each side of this tank, so I need to be careful about hiding those. And the IS-3 gives me his lower plate and then fires HE at me by the look of it. Hurrah! Ah dear. And the AMX is just keeping me tracked. Lower plate on the Tiger 2 has a nice angle on it. And these guys keep shooting me in the track, which I can deal with. Just means I'm sitting here waiting for my track to repair. That's okay. So, trying to use my fairly wide gun arc to get as much angle as I can on my armour. Bouncing some more stuff. Missed the 87's commander's tower, unfortunately, but there we go. Going for another punt, and that time we bounce off it. Boo, boo and indeed hiss. And so I'm basically playing a heavy tank's role here, really. But there I do take another couple of penetrations from someone who's putting shots through what would look like my lower front plate. Now, I don't actually know off the top of my head how thick that is. I was kind of surprised that people were penetrating me there. I hadn't played this tank very much at the time, I should point out. And so I wasn't expecting those penetrations. And I'm wondering if they were firing APCR, but I don't know. Or firing premium ammunition, but I don't know, and I'm not going to get into that too much. 87 is still moving up. We might be able to snipe him out of the battle. Nope. Didn't want to aim it too long. I didn't want people to get shots at my weak spots. And we've already demonstrated that people are capable of penetrating me if they know what they're doing. CDC comes around and takes a shot to the face, the shot that was intended for the 87, but there we go. And we try... Oh, there go my tracks. Now the tracks have actually gone here in a slightly awkward position because I can't actually shoot anybody, which is a little sad. But then again, I'm not in immediate danger of dying myself. Finally managed to take out that 87. That felt like someone else was firing HE at me. This is what you often find. A lot of the time people seem to resort to high explosive when they come to the conclusion that that they can't penetrate your armour. And we finally get taken out by the Tiger 2. So that's a fairly short replay. Again, just showing you... just to show you that you can use how you can use these tanks as a kind of pseudo heavy tank. And it's worth pointing out I was not top tier in this game. So if I was top tier, my armour would clearly work better, but I judged from the tanks that were available I could still make pretty good use of the armour, and I think I was able to make pretty good use of that armour, and the gun was good enough to get the job done. So let's go and have a quick look at the results for this game. So despite my relatively early death, that still ended up being enough for a second class mastery and fire for effect. And is that a Spartan or something for bouncing a shot on less than 10% health? It might be a cool-headed, or one of those awards for bouncing shots. We came second on our team with 1,478 damage done and 881 base experience. It was a cool-headed for getting X number of non-penetrating hits. 8 shots fired, 6 hits, 5 pens for that damage count. We received 28 hits, of which only 5 penetrated. Now, some of those shots were HE as well, so that amounted to the amount of damage we actually took. But we bounced 2.4k damage with our armour, despite the fact that we were not top tier there. So again, just trying to highlight the use of your armour in those situations. Try and get yourself into those more... I mean, I was a bit close there, if we're going to be honest. Try to get yourself into more of those medium range engagements. And you can do very well and bounce a good number of shots. But nonetheless, we were still able to put in a decent performance there, despite not being top tier, and the engagement being at relatively close range. So, now let's go back and have a look at the third type of tank destroyer. So the last category of tank destroyer I wanted to look at is the turreted tank destroyer. As the name implies, they come with a turret. Now you might be wondering to yourself, okay, they come with a turret, but so what now sets these machines apart? Well, historically, generally speaking, turreted tank destroyers were designed as you see them. They're not conversions of another machine, much like the assault guns were designed as you see them. So here, for example, is the T-67 Tier 5 American turreted tank destroyer. Generally speaking, they mount guns... I mean, these are generally found, sorry, I'll just quickly mention, these are generally found in the American and British tech trees. Oh, and Germans. Some of the high-tier Germans have turrets as well. Now, obviously, this means that you are less likely to get flanked, but you presumably have to give something up for that. And traditionally, as I mentioned, these were designed as you see them. And so if you compare them to other machines at the same tier, you find that they mount less powerful guns than non-turreted tank destroyers of the same tier. But generally speaking, the guns are still better than those found on medium or heavy tanks of the same tier. So, but if you compare a turreted tank destroyer to a medium or a heavy tank of the same tier, 1, it tends to have less armour, 2, the turret traverse tends to be significantly worse, and 3, they tend to have less health. So that's the sort of trade-off you're looking at. Often these machines are quite mobile and can kind of be used a bit like a support medium tank. You don't want to get into a close range firefight with these. You want to keep your opponents at range. You still want to make use of your camouflage ratings and all that. The armour is often paltry, although not always. So for example, here we have the T-28 prototype. It has a turret, but it has fairly respectable frontal armour. Also worth noting, with these turreted tank destroyers, in most cases the turret is completely traversable, but not in all cases. So for example, with the T-28 prototype here, the turret cannot turn around to point the gun over the rear of the tank. It cannot shoot over this engine deck. But in the case of the T-67, for instance, it can. It can turn the turret around the whole way and shoot wherever it chooses. So like I say, these things are often used a bit more like a medium tank, a support medium tank, so you still don't want to get close range, but because you're packing a less powerful gun than a fixed casemate tank destroyer, it's more often the case that your gun doesn't have the raw punch to go through the frontal armour of some opponents, so some high tier heavy tanks you're not just going to punch straight through the front of, so your gun needs to get the sides and rear of your opponents in order to penetrate them. These are, of all the tank destroyers, these are the ones that have been probably least affected by the changes to the maps, as the turret maintains these tanks' flexibility in a way that you can't really say the same thing about the fixed casemate tank destroyers. The changes to the maps have hurt them quite a lot. Generally speaking, the assault guns aren't as badly affected either, but I would say the turreted ones are the ones that are the least affected by these changes. So, I guess let's go and have a quick look at a bit of turreted tank destroyer gameplay. Just before we get onto the serious business of shooting things in the face, quickly talk about crew skills, equipment, and whatnot. In terms of crew skills, Sixth Sense is your friend, plus some assortment of repairs or camo, depending on the particular tank in question, how much armor it has, how much health it has, etc. I would, if I for the T-67, this is not a dedicated crew for this tank, it's going to be acing this tank and moving on, but I would take camo over repairs on this machine, for example, but I would take repairs over camo on the T-28 prototype. Now, in terms of equipment, there's a few interesting choices. Gun rammer's a good idea, gun rammer's always a good idea. What do you take for your other slots? Well, one of the advantages of having a turret is that you don't need to move the hull in order to reacquire your target, and so actually that gives a new lease of life to binocular telescopes and camouflage net, as they won't reset if you don't move the hull and you just move the turret, of course. In terms of consumables, a set of consumables that's worth pointing out are the fuels, in this case 105 octane and 100 octane gasoline. Notice it's an extra 5 or 10% to engine power and turret traverse speed. And generally speaking, your turret traverse speed on these turreted tank destroyers is trash, and so that might be an interesting thing that you want to take advantage of, but I leave that up to you. So now, finally, let's go and shoot some things in the face. So here we go. This game we've got the T-25/2. This is the Tier 7 American turreted tank destroyer, and we are in a Tier 7 game, so we're top tier. It's an encounter game here on Prokhorovka, Fiery Salient. There we go. So you're going to see me use positions that you might usually associate more with a medium tank as I play this machine. This tank has a kind of lackluster gun. I mean, turreted tank destroyers in general get a less powerful gun than a regular tank destroyer of the same tier, but even so, the T-25's gun is a little on the lackluster side. So, but it does have a fully rotating turret, of course, and 10 degrees of gun depression, which is quite a nice combination. So initially, we're going up to the ridgeline in the middle of this map, and that's actually where we're going to spend quite a lot of this game, if I'm going to be honest. Using this position to try and spot people and also to try and put shots into people's flanks. You know, if anyone turns up on the hill or something, who gets spotted and I can put shots into them, then that would be dandy. Panther moving up here, perhaps a little too aggressively. I go for a shot on him as it looks like he's pulling back, but don't have time to properly aim the shot, and he flubs. And he flubs, and the shot flubs. So, there we go, them's the breaks. So, just having a quick look here. We saw the looks, but he's disappeared. And people are moving up. I'm slightly disconcerted by the number of heavy tanks we have camping at B9, but there we go, I guess. And this is Prokhorovka, so the game may well be a little drawn out. But as this is an encounter game, a presence on the hill is especially important, and it would be really nice if those guys sitting at B9 would go up onto the actual hill, but there we go. So far you've not really got to see much of the T-25, apart from, well, it's kind of behaving a bit like a medium tank, but with a very slow to rotate turret. Panther is being rather aggressive, and he pays for it. We lose our looks at the same time, about the same time, but that's a trade I'm perfectly happy with. We also have a KV-1 who is not connected. Thankfully it's not one of the Tigers, but even so, it's a bit of a shame that the guy hasn't connected to the game. It's not his fault, but it's a bit of a shame. So we're just trying to see if anyone's going to get spotted. You can see there's also a Hellcat on this central ridge line. Much like me, that of course is the Tier 6 American tank destroyer, so this thing's little brother, if you will. That's a T-20. There's a Chi-Ri over to the right hand side. If that Chi-Ri's going to pop up, then I can put a shot into the side of him, and he is done. The enemy team are capturing the base, slowly. This is an encounter. It does happen very slowly. So there's the Chi-Ri gone. Seeing if we could get a shot on the T-43. It looks like we might be able to. Yes, we can. And the T-20 almost takes an artillery shell to the face. So finally our guys at B9 appear to have gotten the hint and are moving forward. So you can see, even though I'm in a more medium tank style position, I still want other people to spot for me where possible. Put another shot into the T-43 though, while I'm waiting to have the hill spotted. And can we pick up the kill? No. T-34-1 gets there just before I'm able to. Or the shell from the T-34-1 gets there just before mine does. And finally some people are spotting stuff on the hill, although it looks like it's mainly our tank destroyers. And possibly the A-44 who are doing it. So we're going to start putting shots into these guys. Trying to take down weaker targets where possible. So I'm prioritising this Jagdpanther, I think. Or the VK, because the VK has a decent enough gun even though he's a tier 5 and he was a one-shot. The KV-1 there was a one-shot, so I prioritise him. And the Jagdpanther certainly has a decent gun. He's a top-tier tank destroyer and is a one-shot for me. I pulled back because I didn't want to take a hit from the T-20. And I don't have sixth sense. Tiger 1 now. And there we go. We managed to track him into the bargain, which is nice. Now there's a Jagdpanzer 4, but this Tiger 1 is having the bejesus worked out of him, although I've managed to bounce that shot, which is kind of disappointing. Can we put another round into him? Yes, we can, and we pick up the kill. Jagdpanzer 4 now. Again, he's getting shot up, so let's pour fire into him to try and polish off a target, concentrate fire, and there's kill number 3. Jagdpanther is deciding that discretion is the better part of valor here. He's backing off, and suddenly there's only 5 of them left. T-25-2, Hummel, Jagdpanther, T-20, and the T-34/1. We know where the T-25, the Jagdpanther, and the T-20 are. T-20 becomes my 4th kill. And we're just going to push onwards here. And sawing it around. T-34-1 is down by the capture circle. And it does not look like he's having a particularly good day. T-25-2 is over to the left-hand side there. We're being a little cautious because there's still that Jagdpanther sitting up on the hill somewhere. And I don't want to eat an 88mm shell or 105 shell from him. That would make me sad. I only have 850 health to play with. And that 105mm gun does 320 average damage. We knock the guy's tracks off, other people kill him. There we go, that'll be some assistance damage. And now it's just the artillery. And I don't even think we can find a shot on him. I'm pretty sure he's going to die before we're in a position to do anything about it. But we're trying to move down. Oh, that was a big hit. And he is done. And that is the game. So that was a first class mastery, fighter, fire for effect, and bruiser. And if you actually look at how well we did just shy of 2,000 damage, 4 kills, got 959 experience because we picked up 1,500 assistance damage into the bargain, which is a combination of our own spotting and of tracking damage, or damage done to people after you've tracked them. Made a good profit, made a good amount of XP. So there you can see an example of gameplay where you are using your turreted TD, as I say, to get into more of a medium style position, put shots into people's flanks, do a little bit of spotting yourself, and as long as you're not too aggressive, that can work out pretty well. So, let's just round things off in the garage, I guess. So there we go, just a quick rundown of tank destroyers for you, in case you're unsure how to play them or you think you could improve your gameplay of them. I hope you found that video informative, possibly enjoyable, possibly helpful, who knows. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.